Modern culture and even well-meaning therapists hand you a simple formula. Forget, overcome, move on. If it still hurts, you assume you are failing, but the pain you push away does not vanish. It sinks. It drifts below awareness and hardens in the dark. There it begins to shape your thoughts, your moods, your choices, while you tell yourself you are simply being rational. Jung warned that this is not healing, it is surrender. Ignored trauma fragments and reorganizes itself beneath the surface. It becomes a hidden structure in the psyche, a force that acts without asking your permission. For him, healing is something very different. It is not bleaching the stain, not deleting the memory. It is a descent. You go down into what you have spent years avoiding. You confront it, you understand it, you begin to weave it into who you are. Later, we will return to this point. Because when trauma is truly faced, it does not stay a wound. It becomes a scar that guides you instead of bleeding you dry. And in a few minutes, we will talk about what it means to live with that scar. Most people think healing means getting rid of pain, as if your mind were a container. You open the lid, you take out the traumatic memory, you throw it away, and you wait to feel lighter. But your psyche does not work like that. Trauma is not a foreign object stuck in your head. It is not a splinter you can pull out with enough effort or technique. It penetrates deeper, it spreads roots, it weaves itself into how you feel, think, and react. When something happens that your ego cannot bear, it does not disappear. It is pushed aside, sealed off, cut from the story you tell yourself about who you are. That cut piece does not die. It becomes an autonomous complex, a cluster of emotion and memory that no longer answers to you. It is like a fragment of personality that has broken away and now lives its own life in the dark. You do not see it. You only see the traces. A simple phrase, a tone of voice, a smell, a physical sensation, and suddenly you are not in the present anymore. Something inside you surges up and takes the wheel. You react as if you were somewhere else, with someone else, in another time. Your response is not to what is in front of you. It is to what your body remembers and your mind tried to bury. That is the complex. It speaks through your anger, through your paralysis, through your panic, through your urge to run or to attack. And afterwards, you do not understand why you acted like that. You tell yourself you overreacted. You blame your temper. You blame your weakness. But the truth is simpler and darker. A part of you that you refused to face stepped in and acted for you. The more you try to suppress this part, the stronger it becomes. What you push down does not dissolve. It condenses. It hardens. It turns into destiny. Every time you decide to forget instead of understanding, you feed the complex. Every time you distract yourself instead of listening to what hurts, you give it more territory in the unconscious. On the surface, you try to appear fine. You function. You keep going. But under that thin layer, something is growing. A center of gravity you cannot see, slowly bending your choices toward the same pain again and again. Healing is not about expelling trauma. You have nothing to expel. You have to recognize what is already inside. You have to meet the complex that is silently steering your reactions. Until you do that, you will keep calling fate what is in fact your own unfaced past. And the same scenes will return. Unintegrated complexes don't just flare up now and then. Over time, they start to organize your life. They shape your recurring behaviors. They carve out your beliefs. They fix your emotional patterns. On the surface, everything looks like a series of separate events. Different people, different situations, different cities. But underneath, the same script is being staged again and again. The psyche unconsciously recreates situations that mirror the original wound. New faces, same humiliation. New relationship, same abuse. New opportunity, same abandonment. It feels like bad luck. It feels like the world keeps choosing you as a target, but something in you is also choosing. This repetition is not a taste for suffering. It is not self-punishment in the moral sense. It is a blind attempt at resolution. The unconscious keeps restaging the scene, hoping for a different ending, hoping that this time someone will stay, this time someone will protect you, this time you won't be silenced. But without awareness, nothing essential changes. The actors change. The costumes change. The scenery changes. The script stays the same. Without awareness, repetition only deepens the wound. Each new failure thickens the scar tissue around the complex. Each new betrayal feeds the conviction that this is all you can expect. The story does not heal. It hardens. As the cycle continues, something more subtle happens. The complex stops feeling like just a part of you. It starts to feel like you. At first, it's just a recurring reaction, a burst of anger, a collapse into shame, a sudden urge to run away. You still feel a distance. You can vaguely say, "I don't know why I react like this." But with repetition, that distance shrinks. The reaction becomes a style, then a pattern, then an identity. The complex shifts from a fragment on the edge of your psyche to the apparent center of who you are. You are no longer someone who was humiliated. You are the humiliated one. You are no longer someone who was abandoned. You are the one people always leave. This prepares the ground for full identification with the victim. The old wound stops visiting you. It moves in. It furnishes the house. It chooses the colors on the wall. From the outside, it looks like you are making choices. From the inside, it is the complex choosing the same ending, again and again. Not because you are weak, but because the unconscious is still trying, blindly, to close a story that was never allowed to end. Over time, trauma stops being just something that happened to you. It starts to feel like what you are. The victim, the rejected one, the fragile one. Jung calls this identification with the complex. The wound moves to the center of your inner world. It pulls your beliefs, your relationships, your choices into its orbit. You begin to see everything through it. You read every word, every silence as confirmation of the same story. This fusion is not a conscious wish to suffer. You are not waking up in the morning choosing pain. It is an unconscious attempt to stay in one piece when everything inside feels broken. The mind clings to what is familiar, even when the familiar is unbearable. That is why the prospect of healing can feel like a threat, not a promise. If the pain goes, what is left of you? Who are you without your anger, without your fear, without the sadness that has followed you for years? The questions are quiet, but they are ruthless. If this is not me, then who am I? This is how the invisible prison is built, not with walls, but with conclusions about yourself. I am the one who is always hurt. I am the one who is always left. I am the one who cannot be loved. And so you move through life as if this sentence were already written. You return to the same kinds of people. You accept the same patterns of neglect, of humiliation, of abandonment. From the outside, it looks like weakness or lack of intelligence. From the inside, it is something else, a loyalty to the only story you know about yourself. This is why you end up in destructive dynamics again and again. Why you sabotage yourself at the exact moment when something good is about to happen. Why you pull away from care, from respect, from tenderness, as if they were dangerous. There is a part of you that does not believe you belong there. A part trained by the trauma to feel at home only in places that hurt. Jung saw this not as a moral failure, but as a tragic identification. The complex speaks, and you answer as if it were your own voice. Separating yourself from this story is not simple. It is the slow, uncomfortable work of asking, what in this pain is actually me? And what was imposed on me, repeated around me, carved into me? Until that work begins, the prison holds. Not because the door is locked, but because you no longer remember that there was ever a door. Jungian healing does not begin with comfort, and it does not end with symptom relief. It asks you to go down, not away from your pain, but toward the place where it lives. He would say that trauma does not sit on the surface of your mind. It sinks. It buries itself in the layers you do not see, and from there it directs your reactions, your fears, your so-called choices. If you want to change anything real, you have to go there. The first movement is confrontation. Conscious confrontation. That means you stop circling around the wound. You turn toward it. Not as an analyst, standing at a safe distance, explaining it to yourself with clever words. Not as a judge, condemning your own weakness. You meet it as a witness. You let the images come. The sensations, the shame, the rage, the helplessness. You do not minimize. You do not cut it down with logic. You stay. You feel what you have spent years refusing to feel. For Jung, repression is not a small mistake. It is the main enemy of your growth. Everything that is pushed down returns. It comes back in dreams, in symptoms, in patterns that embarrass you and ruin what you try to build. Conscious confrontation is the moment you stop running from this return and look it in the face. From there, a second movement becomes possible. Recovery. Trauma did not only take your calm, it did not just disturb your sleep or your trust in other people. It buried parts of you. There was a time when you were more spontaneous, when you spoke without choking your words in your throat, when you trusted a little more, wanted more, reached for things with less calculation and more life. Under the impact of trauma, many of these qualities were sent away. Jung spoke of this as a kind of loss of soul, as if living fragments of the psyche had gone into hiding to protect themselves. Recovery is not a pleasant memory exercise. It is slow inner work, like digging. You notice where you shut down, where your voice dies, where joy feels suspicious, where desire feels dangerous, and then, step by step, you invite these parts back into the present, not as ideas, but as actions. You allow yourself to laugh in situations where you would normally freeze. You risk saying what you actually think, even if your body expects punishment. You test trust again, in small, controlled doses. You give yourself permission to want something openly. Each of these gestures is a small act of soul retrieval. Piece by piece, what trauma pushed into the dark begins to move again, but confrontation and recovery are still not enough. Without a third movement, the past remains a collection of scattered fragments. The third movement is what Jung called symbolic integration. Integration is not a slogan. It is not you telling yourself that everything happens for a reason. It is deeper and more demanding than that. Jung saw that the unconscious does not speak in neat arguments. It speaks in symbols, in images, dreams, acts, and meanings that cannot be reduced to a sentence. Symbolic integration means that the trauma you lived through is no longer just a raw event or a private hell. It becomes something you can carry in your inner world with form and meaning. You might work with a dream that repeats the wound in disguised images. You might draw, write, or move in ways that give shape to what happened. You might discover a symbol that holds the weight of your experience, a place, a figure, a scene that condenses your pain and your survival into one image. Through this process, the trauma stops being only destructive. You do not glorify it. You do not say it was good. You recognize that, forced through it, you developed qualities that would not have appeared otherwise. A different kind of resilience, a harsher, cleaner clarity, a capacity for compassion that does not come from theory but from having been broken yourself. The wound heals, but it leaves a mark. And in Jung's vision, that mark, when understood symbolically, becomes a point of strength, a place in your inner landscape where you know exactly what you have endured. These three movements, confrontation, recovery, integration, do not unfold in a straight line. They come in spirals. You return to the same pain at deeper levels. You find new parts that were still hiding. You discover new symbols that express what words never managed to say. Each turn thickens your ego, gives it more weight, more stability, and there comes a point where trauma is no longer an open wound that bleeds into everything you touch. It becomes part of your story. Still serious, still painful, but integrated into a larger whole. From there, you are ready to look at a different question. What does life look like when the wound no longer rules you, but the scar quietly shapes your strength? That is the next step in this journey. True healing is not about going back. It is not a return to some untouched version of you, waiting behind the damage. It is a transformation. You become someone who could not exist without what you have survived. The wound does not vanish. It does not politely leave your history. It remains, but as you work with it, as you confront it and give it shape, something changes. The trauma loses its parasitic grip. It no longer feeds on your reactions. It no longer sits in the dark, pulling strings from behind your decisions. It becomes what it always was in reality. An event. Painful, yes. Formative, yes, but an event, not a god, not a master. You still remember, you still feel echoes, but memory is not command. You are no longer dragged, only informed. You can pause where before you were already gone. You can choose where before you only repeated. This is the point where reenactment begins to die. The old patterns still knock. They still whisper the same reactions, the same escapes, the same defenses. But your hand is no longer on automatic. You do not have to open the door just because something inside you panics. When trauma is symbolized and integrated, it moves into a wider field of meaning. It is no longer a raw injury tearing through your days. It becomes part of a pattern you can see and name. A chapter, not the whole book. From that place, something harder and quieter appears. Embodied wisdom, not a slogan, not an insight you can flash around, but a weight in your voice, a precision in your choices, a kind of seriousness the unbroken rarely carry. You know what it is to stand in the unbearable and not dissolve. You know what it costs just to stay. So you stop wasting yourself on what is shallow. You stop confusing chaos with intensity. You stop calling what hurts you fate or just how you are. This is not enlightenment. You still have bad days. You still get triggered. But the center of gravity has shifted. The trauma that once sat at the core of your identity moves to the side. It is there. It matters. It explains a lot. But it no longer speaks for you. The scar is what remains. It marks the place. It shows where the skin was torn, where the old life ended. You can trace it with your fingers. You can remember exactly how it felt to bleed there. But the scar does not open just because you touch it. It is firm. It holds. It is not beautiful in a sentimental way. It is simply true. A record written on the body of your psyche. The wound paralyzed you. It dictated your reactions. It made every present moment a repetition of the same past scene. The scar does something else. It warns. It guides. It tells you where you must be careful and where you have already proven you can endure. This is the difference. You are not free because nothing ever hurt you. You are free because what hurt you no longer commands your every move. The pain is part of you, but it is not the driver. It is not the architect of your future. That is what this stage of healing really is. Not forgetting, not erasing, but walking forward with a visible mark that says, something happened here. It almost destroyed me. It did not succeed. The scar is not contamination. It is evolution. And every time you notice it, you are reminded of one simple, quiet fact. You are no longer living as the wound. You are living as the one who survived it. If this way of looking at trauma speaks to you, subscribe now so you don't lose this thread. Healing from trauma is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of a different way of living with what happened. You still carry your past, but it no longer drags you by the throat. You learn to walk with it. You learn to breathe with it. You don't erase what was done to you. You stop letting it decide who you are. The memories remain. They visit. They knock. But they no longer own the key to your house. They no longer break in at night and set the rules for your day. Pain still appears, sometimes suddenly, in a smell, in a look, in a word. But now there is a distance. A small space between what you feel and what you do. In that space, you remember something simple and hard. This happened to me. But this is not the whole of me. Individuation means exactly that. Not becoming pure, not becoming untouchable, becoming whole with your cracks, keeping the fractures visible. Not as decoration, not as a story to impress anyone, just as a fact. A quiet line in the stone that says, yes, this is where it broke. And this is where it was rebuilt. To live like this, you need more than insight. You need the courage to face your own story without flinching. Not once, not in a single emotional breakthrough, but again and again. You return to the same rooms inside you. You open the same doors. You look at the same scenes. And every time you do it with a little less fear, a little less shame, a little more clarity, the world will continue to offer shortcuts. Numb it, forget it. Distract yourself. Pretend it never happened. You will know these for what they are. Ways of staying asleep. Ways of keeping the wound open behind a clean bandage. You are done with that. Or at least, you are learning to be done with it. The scar is still there. It will always be there. You can feel it when you touch that part of your story. But now, it doesn't bleed. It doesn't split open every time life brushes against it. It holds. It has thickened. It has darkened. It has become part of your structure. When you look at it, you don't see just the damage. You see the weight you carried. You see the nights you survived. You see the choices you made when nobody was watching. You see that you did not break completely. Or if you did, you did not stay broken. You picked up what you could. You learned to live with what you couldn't recover. This is the quiet center you move from now. Not from the old panic, not from the old rage. From the knowledge that you have gone down and come back more than once. From the memory that you did not run from yourself forever, that you finally turned around and looked. Living after integration is not a victory pose, it is a daily choice. Sometimes you will fall back into the old script. Sometimes the past will sit at the table and speak as if it still owns you. When that happens, you do not have to pretend to be above it. You just have to remember that you have another option now. You can answer from the scar, not from the wound. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, subscribe. So the next time you feel that old pull from the past, you'll have words waiting for you, words that don't promise miracles. Only this. You do not have to go back to sleep. You can stay awake with what happened and still live.